Great, yes. Oh, we've got some more South African representation, but via Oxford. Hello, and hello, West Yorkshire and Murray. Okay, so we're now recording, so I will now introduce and welcome along everybody to this webinar on the future of books and reading. And happy Book Week Scotland, everybody. I'm Sean McNamara, Director of CILIPS Scotland, and we're delighted to be hosting a session that can be part of the wonderful week of Book Week Scotland, which is happening all over the country this week, where the library's delivering lots of sessions. I know many of you on the webinar today are not based in Scotland, but hopefully you'll see some of the activity going on as well. Bit of admin, the chat will be running throughout. Please do put things in the chat, and our speakers will be monitoring the chat. We'll monitor it as well and keep an eye on it. There'll hopefully be plenty of time for questions at the end and discussion around some of the topics after the presentation. If you can keep your mic off, just double check it is off, because I think sometimes mics are on when you come into Teams, so just double check it's off. Cameras can be on or off depending on your preference, but please do leave them on if you can. So now introduction to the webinar itself. So in the UK, as many of us will have heard, there is a real decline in the numbers reading for pleasure, particularly around young people, but also all ages. And the paper that we're featuring today with our speakers aims to provide a positive and hopeful narrative to frame some of the future thinking around that. I'll not steal the speaker's thunder too much by talking about the paper itself, but basically it draws upon the knowledge and expertise of individuals spanning a range of sectors, including contributions from all of the CILIPS team. And we're joined by Kirsten and Leah, my CILIPS Scotland colleagues today, who also contributed to this around 5 themes, which I know Sarah and Patrick will be talking you through, so I'll not mention them just now. So in this webinar, which is taking place in Book Week Scotland, our speakers hope to discuss these themes in relation to library professionals' perspectives and experiences, and hopefully to better understand your interests and priorities in relation to that. So very quick intro to our 2 speakers. We have Professor Sarah McGowan, who is a Professor of Literacy, Psychology and Education and the Co-Director of the Literacy Lab at the University of Edinburgh. And Patrick Errington is a poet, translator and multidisciplinary researcher, and is currently a lecturer in English and creative writing, as well as a co-director of the Literacy Lab at the University of Edinburgh. So Sarah, I think you're maybe kicking things off, so I will pass to you and you can take it from here. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Sean. And I do have some slides to share, so just give me a minute while I get these on screen. So I hope everyone is able to see these okay. Yep.
All good.
Okay, perfect. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Well, as Sean has already introduced us, just to say, so my name's Sarah McGowan. I'm joined today by my colleague, Patrick Errington. And today we're going to be talking about a paper which we published earlier this year in September, entitled The Future of Books and Reading. And as Sean said, this paper was really in response to what we see as a kind of decline in reading enjoyment and engagement within the UK, which has prompted this National Year of Reading next year. And what we'd really like to do is give enough time for questions and discussion and reflection at the end. So as we're talking through the presentation, if you'd like to put anything into the chat, please feel free to do so. I think Patrick's also going to put a link to the paper and also the Literacy Lab into the chat as well. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read the paper, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to do that after. So as I said, the paper was really written in response to this decline. So the National Literacy Trust have been tracking children and young people's reading enjoyment and engagement for the last 20 years and have seen in general this sort of trend, this continued decline in how much they say they enjoy reading and how much they choose to read in their free time. And the Reading Agency are tracking adults' reading practices within the UK and are also finding quite low levels of reading enjoyment and engagement as well. And so drawing on quite a broad range of research from both academic literature and grey literature, we set out 5 themes that we thought would be quite useful to frame thinking and discussion in relation to the future of books and reading. And these themes are enjoy, engage, empower, enrich and expand. And within the paper, as Sean said, we have a sort of reference to a lot of research, but also contributions from individuals working across different sectors, as well as children, young people and adults' voices represented within the paper. But what we'd really like to do today is to sort of focus across the paper in terms of our thinking, in terms of libraries and the library professional, like being a library professional. And so as we're talking, it might be quite useful to reflect on these themes within the context of your own job. But if you don't work within libraries, maybe you just want to reflect on these within the context of your own reading practices. So Patrick and I will present together, sort of moving back and forth between each theme. So the first theme that I'd like to touch upon is that of enjoy. So over the last few years within the Literacy Lab, we've been carrying out a number of different research studies looking at readers' experiences with books. And what we've come to learn is that there are lots of different ways to enjoy books, and readers seek a whole diversity of different types of reading experiences. So books can give opportunities for relaxation, for adventure, for escapism, for excitement, and books can provide opportunities for us to pursue our interests, to learn new things, to reflect on ourselves, to learn about others. Books can be gripping, they can be intense, they can be sad, they can be light-hearted. And basically what this means is that when it comes to nurturing reading enjoyment, it's about promoting reading in ways which are personally meaningful to individual readers and understanding their own motives, goals, and purposes for reading. And so from a library perspective, it's about making sure that the book provision really reflects the interests and goals of your community. But we also recognise that there's a bit of work to do in terms of supporting people to choose books that really allow for the type of experiences that they're looking for. And so quite a lot of our work in the Literacy Lab recently has been about how we support people who are maybe not such experienced readers to find books which are really going to be personally meaningful to them and enjoyable ultimately for them as well. Okay, I'll pass over to Patrick now.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So reading engagement is certainly being recognized today as one of the sort of crucial and I think indeed central factors in enhancing the potential positive effects of reading and reading experiences. And for my money, it's also one of the most complex and interesting factor here. So thanks, Sarah, for letting me say a few words about this one. Historically speaking, research looking at reading engagement has tended to treat this concept as effectively synonymous with how often or how long people read. And I think this makes a lot of sense. Reading or no and how much is really important, of course. And as a metric, it's quite an easy one to sort of assess and quantify and then to analyze in relation to the kinds of benefits that we look for from reading, like positive academic, social, and emotional development, improved reading skills, language opportunities, and so on. But where it gets, I think, particularly interesting for me is that reading isn't just an on and off switch. You don't just read or not read. There are a whole variety of ways of engaging in reading. And these include things like different attentional stances or orientations. Think of, for instance, what we might call immersive reading, like losing yourself in a book, versus close reading, which is often taught in schools and used for characterizing or analyzing text features, latent meanings, that kind of thing. And these, of course, are also shaped by readers' abilities and fluency. Obviously, a reader has to be skilled enough at reading to read immersively and have attentional resources to devote to doing that. Moreover, they also are guided by their reading goals or expectations. Right? If you think, for instance, of the difference between reading to remember facts for a test compared to reading to just make the time pass on a long train journey. And this, of course, brings to light the importance of environments in influencing the quality of engagement in reading. A quiet train journey, right, supports a very different kind of reading than a chaotic classroom or an exciting book club or the ticking clock the night before an exam. And finally, of course, there are the texts themselves, which can solicit different kinds of attention as well. A poem on Instagram asks for a very different kind of attention in reading than does an instruction manual or a fantasy paperback novel. And so for me, I think helping readers to learn to align these different features of engagement, and I've obviously not addressed them all, and if you think of others, please feel free to include them in the chat. But aligning these features is, I think, crucial to encouraging not just more reading experiences, but better reading experiences, more enjoyable reading experiences, which in turn will hopefully encourage greater quantity of reading. And this is where I think librarians, teachers, information professionals, parents, guardians, etc., all really key to helping readers to access and create social and physical environments so that they're aligned with and supportive of reading interests, in supporting readers to access books and forms of text that align with those interests and environments, and encouraging reading goals that foster the kind of attention that those books reward, right? Reading a poem as an instruction manual is, I think, guaranteed to be a disappointing experience for a lot of readers. So thank you. I'll hand that back to Sarah for the next one then.
Thank you. So the next theme that we put within the paper, and as I've said, I'd encourage you to look at the paper so you can see the sort of research and points that we raise in relation to each. But the next theme is really that of empowerment and looking at the potential for books and reading to be empowering for readers. For example, when readers see their own lives, their own experiences or identities reflected in what they read. And in the Literacy Lab over the last few years, we've been looking at some research looking at diversity and representation within fiction books and the potential benefits associated with these. And what readers often talk about are benefits such as a more positive sense of self, a sense of belonging, positive emotions through seeing their identities, their dispositions, their realities reflected in what they read. And so it's really important, I suppose, from a library perspective to think about curating a book provision which really reflects the community that you're working within and the diversity of lives, experiences, and identity within this. But access to information is also empowering as well. So, for example, being able to know your rights, what opportunities there are available to you, having access to information in order to advocate for yourself and for others. And libraries are often seen to be a sort of trusted source of information. And so being able to access, for example, digital devices and computers within libraries, this gives individuals within the community access to information to feel more empowered to support different aspects of their lives, but also their learning as well.
As for enriching, I think there's a wealth of research already out there that's really starting to show just the incredible myriad ways that reading can enrich people's lives through its potential to support intellectual, social, and emotional development across the lifespan. For instance, things like skill development, empathy, well-being. In addition, reading engagement has been shown to mitigate against economic disadvantage. Well, reading skills are associated with positive economic and life outcomes like financial capability and life expectancy. But where I think for us it gets particularly interesting is that the way to fully understand and then I think promote these life enriching effects of reading, we researchers and literacy professionals should be looking to enrich our views of reading itself, what reading is and who readers are. And this includes things like recognizing and studying the full diversity and plurality of reading engagement, the ways and reasons that people read, in addition to how much, as I just mentioned before, as well as Sarah was mentioning, empowering a wider diversity of readers as well. And it also means, I think, studying and promoting a richer variety of text types when we talk about book reading. Traditionally, we've really looked quite a lot at fiction book reading, but this could be expanded to include poetry, graphic novels, fan fiction, as well as traditional fiction novels, as well as then I think other formats, including digital, audio, paper, also enhanced text or text from which people are engaged in communities, responding to each other in digital environments. And this brings me then to creating a richer view of the physical and social environments in which people may encounter and then interact with books and each other. This is, of course, central to things like book clubs and social digital reading spaces, book festivals, and, of course, centrally, libraries. And so for librarians, information professionals, instructors, parents, teachers, helping a wider array of young readers to develop richer engagement strategies with a more diverse selection of texts and formats, social, physical reading environments. This, I think, represents a really exciting opportunity to, in turn, further enhance the way that reading is already out there and enriching people's lives.
Thanks, Patrick. And then the last theme that we'd like to talk about is expand. So a lot of my research, for example, over the last few years really focused on books, but I'm beginning to really be interested in a kind of much broader range of reading activities that individuals are involved in. And I think reading practices and how we define reading is continuing to evolve, and we're being able to see this, particularly in relation to the National Year of Reading next year. And I think libraries and library professionals have a key role to play in terms of shaping contemporary and future reading practices. So books are being read, as Patrick said, in lots of different formats, whether it's print, audio, digital, in lots of different forms as well, whether it's sort of long form, short stories, quick reads, but thinking about a broader range of texts, whether it's poetry, graphic novels, comics, magazines, newspapers, having these sort of available within libraries is obviously really important. And reading enjoyment, as I said, it does take different forms. And so to support enjoyment, engagement, empowerment, and enrichment, we need to make sure that there's a diversity of texts available for communities, both in terms of content, but also in terms of form as well. We also know that the cost of books is becoming increasingly prohibitive for some, and libraries and librarians are therefore also essential from a social equity perspective through supporting and providing more equitable access to books, but also, as I've said, to text and to information as well. And so I think it's important to think much more broadly about the broader range of services and text types which libraries offer. And in relation to the paper on Expand, we also talk about working more broadly, not just within our profession, but also across professions, in order to support our collective efforts to support reading enjoyment and engagement among the UK population. Before we move on to sort of having some discussion or reflection on some of these themes, I'd just like to point to a couple of resources and also events that we have running later this week as well. So the first of these are resources for librarians to support reading enjoyment and engagement for children and young people. Love to Read Libraries was a programme and a set of resources co-created with library professionals and those working within the library sector. It's intended for those working in community or public libraries as a way to support children's reading enjoyment and engagement, whether it's individual children coming into the library or supporting with school visits to the public library. And then these two resources that I'd like to also mention are focused on young people, so teenagers. These came about as a result of the Young People's Reading Project, which was a 3.5-year project we carried out with Scottish Book Trust. The first is a guide with lots of information for teachers and librarians working within secondary school contexts. And the second resource was produced by Scottish Book Trust as a result of this project. And what we recognised in this project was that very often teenagers don't have the language to talk about the types of things that they're interested in. And often this is needed as a sort of first step into reading. And so Story Deck is really intended to start these discussions about interests and goals and motives for reading as well. And if you're working within Scottish secondary schools, I'm sure you probably will have already received your copy of this already. As Sean said at the beginning, this is Book Week Scotland. This is the first day. There's a really exciting programme of events organised. I'll try and put a link into the chat afterwards. But just to mention two other events that we'll be doing later in the week. One is on Thursday with Graham McRae-Burnett, and the other one is on Sunday with Peter Mackay. Both events are called The Power and Pleasures of Reading, and they're based on a reading and wellbeing project which we carried out a couple of years ago, where we encourage readers to reflect on the different ways in which books and reading had supported their wellbeing, sort of reflecting on their own reading histories. And so we'll be talking with Graham and Peter, who will be reflecting on their own experiences of reading, being a reader, and books that have maybe been particularly meaningful to them. And so please do feel free to come along to those, and I'll put a link in to the chat. But beyond these, there's a whole host of other events going on, so I really would encourage you to sign up. And Patrick and I had intentionally kept this presentation relatively short because, as I said, we put forward this paper with these 5 different themes as a way to prompt thinking and discussion, and also to better understand these themes from other people's perspectives. So we're interested in you as library professionals, whether these themes align with any of your own interests or priorities, whether any of these themes felt particularly important to you, whether you feel that there's maybe something missing as well that you think would be useful to discuss. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and I'll just put these prompts in the chat so we can maybe have a discussion about them. Just to say, there's a link to Patrick and I's contact details there if you'd like to get in touch with either of us, and also to the Literacy Lab website, and also the link to a new project, Rewriting Worlds, which is led by Patrick Errington, and it's starting next month. This is an exciting 4-year project looking at young people's engagement with poetry, and so if you're interested in learning more about that, there's a link there. And also just to say, I know a copy of this recording will be made available, but there'll also be a link of these slides on our website as well, in case you'd like to access any of this information again.